Hi, welcome back to Absinthe and Ink. I'm MJ, and I wanted to do a video on a book that is incredibly important to the Gothic horror literature genre. But very few people have read it, and even more people have probably never heard of it. And that book is Phantasmagoriana. Now, this book was published in 1812 in German and then translated into French and eventually translated into English in 1813. However, this book has been out of print for over 200 years until last year when a publisher named Dark Moon Books released this edition. Now, this edition is pretty special, and I'll get on to that in a second. But you're probably wondering, well, what the heck is this book and why is it so influential? Well, this is a book of ghost stories, as I stated. And these are the stories that Lord Byron read out to Claire Clairmont, Dr. Polidori, Percy, and Mary Shelley during the summer of 1816. Now, while the stories in here aren't frightening, these aren't the kind of stories where you're going to have to sleep with the lights on after you read them. As a matter of fact, some of the stories were actually kind of charming and they had happy endings. But you have to remember the period. Think about it. You're a 17 or 18-year-old girl sitting in a villa on the lake while a storm rages outside. And you have the period's greatest poet reading these stories. And undoubtedly, Byron was probably incredibly dramatic when he was reading these, giving the full effect of them. So I can understand why these stories probably would have had some kind of impact on Mary, and also Dr. Polidori, who wrote the first modern vampire story called, well, The Vampire. Now, Mary Shelley did talk about having a dream that inspired her to write Frankenstein. But that dream didn't come just from nowhere. That came from her listening to the stories in this book and also listening to Percy, Dr. Polidori, and Byron talking about the theory of galvanism, which was the experimentation that was going on by trying to bring life back to the dead. And there had been some experiments that had taken place with frog legs and muscles on cadavers moving when electricity was applied to them. So you can kind of understand where Mary was kind of getting her idea for Frankenstein at that point. But you also have to remember that during that period, this was a time when there were people known as the resurrectionists who were going around to the graveyards in England and, well, stealing bodies and selling them off to anatomists who were doing experiments, and also not only just to learn about the body, but some of them were also trying to find the secret of life hidden within the body. So there were a lot of things going on in that environment that really inspired Mary Shelley. Now, Mary Shelley, in her 1831 edition of Frankenstein, into which she writes the introduction, she talks about the fact that she hasn't heard these stories ever since 1816 when Byron read them out to them 15 years earlier. But she states that she still remembers them with great detail. So this book really did have some influence on her. Now, this edition, this is Phantasmagoriana Deluxe. And the reason that it's called Deluxe is because in 1813, this book was translated into English, and the woman who did the translation decided to leave some of the original stories out and add an additional story called The Storm. And that edition was known as Tales of the Dead. And so that's included in this edition. So you have Phantasmagoriana and you also have the Tales of the Dead. Now, the other thing that I really like about this book is that it has some really great illustrations in here. And I think these might be original illustrations from the book. It's the original book. But I absolutely love stuff like this. These, you don't see artwork like this very much anymore. So that I really like. And there's also in the back, they also have a little section for suggested reading if you want to go ahead and read some more stories in the genre. And what's great about this is that a lot of these stories you have probably heard of, but a lot of these stories you probably haven't. So if you really want to get into the meat and bones of Gothic literature, those are probably some good ones to read. Now, if you're looking for something a little bit different with spooky season coming up, and you've read pretty much, the big ones, and maybe you're not a big fan of blood and guts like me, then this is a really fun book to check out. And if you do read it, I'd love to know your thoughts on it. So if you do read it, put your comments down below. And also, what I'd really love is if you have some kind of obscure Gothic literature that you'd like to recommend, because I would love to read some more of it. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on Absinthe and Ink. Bye-bye.